Britain in the 18th century was a very hierarchical place. At its most extreme, this can be seen in the way that people's status was very clearly labelled. Look at a will from the period and you'll find that the testator provides this as part of their title. For example, John Smith, yeoman, or Robert Brown, gentleman. When the Duke of Ormond was subject to a bill of attainder in 1715, he was stripped of his titles and given a new position in society as a yeoman. Viscount Bolingbroke was downgraded even further to the rank of common labourer. Although on the death of Queen Anne in 1714 the crown had passed her distant German cousin Georg Ludwig of Hanover, who became King George I, it would be wrong to assume that the monarchy did not retain enormous power after that point. Both George I and his son George II were closely involved in decisions affecting government and appointment to senior roles in the armed forces or the church. Many in the elite worked hard to secure jobs at court, which was still a dynamic centre of power and influence. The creation of British peerages, which conveyed the right to a seat in the House of Lords, was still a closely protected part of the royal prerogative, and top politicians found it hard to keep their places if they did not enjoy the confidence of the monarch. Foreign policy and decisions over going to war were also areas in which the monarch commanded enormous influence. Alongside the monarchy, there was a firmly embedded aristocracy, who for the most part enjoyed fabulous wealth and owned extensive estates across the country, bringing with it significant political power. Some nobles were able effectively to nominate people to places as MPs in the House of Commons, and even if they did not enjoy an absolute monopoly on such places, often had a crucial role to play in persuading their supporters to vote for particular candidates. The Duke of Newcastle, for example, was patron of 7 constituencies, had the power of nomination at 4 more, and enjoyed some degree of influence in another 3. Even a relatively minor peer, like Viscount Folkestone, has some sway over 2 seats. While the House of Lords had ceded some power to the Commons, particularly over financial matters, the Lords remained an important part of Parliament, and it was often there that major issues were played out. As the final court of appeal, the Lords retained huge power as a judicial as well as a legislative assembly. The Lords was the final court of appeal, and some high-profile state trials were held before them. It's worth remembering that many of the main government ministers were often to be found in the House of Lords, including several prime ministers, the Dukes of Newcastle and Grafton, and the second Marquess of Rockingham, to name just a few. Also, some of the best speakers of the day were in the upper chamber. William Pitt the Elder had made his name in the Commons, but was later to be a forceful speaker in the Lords as Earl of Chatham. That said, it's clear that some regarded promotion to the Lords as being in some sense a retirement, and some young politicians were advised against going there too early in their careers. While the Lords was hugely significant, through the 18th century the House of Commons became steadily the main focus for many key political struggles. This was a great deal to do with the Commons having steadily secured the main responsibility for overseeing financial measures. Following the rise to power of Sir Robert Walpole, an MP from Norfolk, who'd helped rescue the country from financial meltdown following a stock market crash known as the South Sea Bubble, the Commons increasingly came to be seen as the more dynamic of the 2 houses of Parliament. It was where ambitious politicians hoped to make their careers and secure lucrative places in government. Many MPs came from traditional gentry backgrounds, with some seats held by heirs to peerages, giving future members of the Lords experience of Parliament before succeeding to their titles. However, there were also numbers of non-gentry MPs and members who'd enjoyed careers in the army and navy. Many were wealthy merchants who'd made their careers in large towns before making it to Parliament. Others had made their fortunes in one or other of Britain's colonies. It's important to remember that this was a period when Britain's empire was growing. Britain might have liked to think of itself as a land of liberty, but much wealth was created by enslaved people working in colonies, especially in the West Indies and America. There were also a handful of people in Parliament from humbler backgrounds too. For example, Joseph Earl, MP for Bristol from 1710 to 1727, was the son of a Wiltshire yeoman. Of course, power was more complex than simply what happened at Westminster. Britain was a prosperous country. Many wealthy men and women never aspired to a place in Parliament, but lived prosperous lives in towns and in the countryside. Also, wealth increasingly didn't just mean what was gained through traditional means like farming large tracts of land or making money as merchant adventurers. The South Sea Bubble had showed how innovations in the stock market might make huge fortunes, though its spectacular crash also showed how easily they might be lost. As new machinery and ways of generating power came to be understood, there was much to be gained from control and exploitation of resources like coal mines or through mineral deposits. There were plenty of other ways for power to be expressed too. This might be in a town where people enjoyed influence through their membership of the corporation, or through nomination as a justice of the peace, enabling them to conduct trials. For the poorer in society, their experience of power was likely to be at a different level. The basic way that many learned their trades was still through apprenticeship. Young people might be apprenticed to a master for a period of 7 years to learn their craft. For them, the master, or indeed the mistress, was where they really experienced power. For the less fortunate in society, those out of work, or elderly and dependent on some form of charity, the power of local parish officials, beadles, and poor law commissioners were much more important than anything that happened in Westminster. One should not forget, too, the role of the Church. During this period, the Church of England was hugely influential. One had to be a communicant member of the Church to qualify to be an officer in the army, to take a degree at one of the 2 universities, Oxford and Cambridge, or to become a practicing lawyer or enter Parliament. Clever children from modest backgrounds might be able to secure a place at a grammar school and university, maybe partially paying their way as a servant to a more wealthy fellow student, to enable them to enter the church to improve their condition by becoming members of the clergy. As with everything else, there was a strict hierarchy there, with some poor curates working hard for less money than a skilled craftsman might earn. At the top of the clerical tree were the bishops, who might be able to expect substantial salaries with their bishoprics, and they also enjoyed the right to a seat in the House of Lords. It's easy to think of Britain in 1714 as a very male-dominated place. The armed forces, Parliament, the judiciary, major schools and universities were all male-only, but that doesn't mean that women didn't also play an important role in society. A good example might be Princess, later Queen, Caroline, wife of George, Prince of Wales, who came over with George I on Queen Anne's death. As George I had no wife of his own, he divorced his in unpleasant circumstances some years before. It fell to Caroline to fulfil many of the usual roles played by a queen. And even more so when the 2 Georges fell out not long after arriving in Britain, Caroline proved an adept politician, playing an important role in the life of the Wales's alternative opposition court. Still more, once she became queen, her support for Sir Robert Walpole proved crucial, especially on occasions when he was experiencing difficult political pressures. Indeed, her death in 1737 proved disastrous for Walpole, and it's notable that he fell from power just 5 years later. Other prominent aristocratic women who took an active role in politics included the flamboyant Georgian Duchess of Devonshire, who is depicted in political satires for her role campaigning in general elections, and there were plenty more like her. The period is full of significant elite women who were very often involved in local politics of their area, sometimes more so than their husbands, sons or brothers. As well as elite women like Caroline or the wives of aristocrats, there were influential women among the middling sorts too, like Hester Thrale, later Piozzi, who was a friend of Samuel Johnson, or Elizabeth Montagu, who came to be known as the Queen of the Bluestockings, who hosted a famous salon in London, Bath and elsewhere, and was surrounded by luminaries, but their discussions supposedly had politics off the menu and they concentrated instead on the arts and literature.